You are listening to Small Business Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives small business owners the straight talk on productivity, time management, business systems, leading your teams, strategic decision-making, and mindset. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the productivity specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Small Business Straight Talk. Today is episode 311, Applying Your Learning to Supercharge Your Success with Nick Hutchison. If you are a business owner who wants to learn effective business strategies, improve time management, and elevate productivity to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. Today, I'm looking forward to you meeting our guest, Nick Hutchison. Nick is the visionary force behind BookThinkers, a thriving 7-figure marketing agency, bridging authors and readers. In just over 7 years, he has cultivated a platform reaching over 1 million people monthly and hosts the top 2% global podcast, BookThinkers, Life-Changing Books, featuring interviews with renowned authors like Grant Cardone and Lewis Howes. Nick's platform and services have empowered countless authors to reach millions of readers, driving substantial revenue growth. His services encompass video production, podcast booking, and social media brand building. With a mission to inspire readers to take action, Nick authored Rise of the Reader, delving into mastering reading habits and applying newfound knowledge to unlock potential. Today, I'm going to get to talk to Nick about how you can take action and supercharge your success with learning. And yes, his specialty is books, but it can also be from podcasts. It can be from people you're speaking to. However you're consuming new knowledge, how do you bridge that gap between being a consumer of knowledge and an action taker and implementing and, really embodying that newfound knowledge? Before we dive in and get to meet Nick, I would like to invite you to take my Next Level Business Owner quiz. I got to ask you, what is more productive than taking a short quiz and finding out where you are stuck? What's most holding you back? And getting a personalized playlist to help you solve those exact pain points. Seriously, head on over right now, hit pause, and go to amberdelagarza.com/quiz. Take the short quiz. The personalized playlist will show up in your inbox, and then you can jump right back here and meet Nick. And now let's meet our guest and get to the straight talk. Welcome to Productivity Straight Talk, Nick. How are you today?
Amber, I am doing well. Can I ask you the first question today?
Yes.
Flip the script a little bit. So what is your favorite productivity book of all time? I'm curious.
Oh my goodness. I don't know that I have a favorite productivity book, but the book that I recommend most to business owners is going to be Profit First.
What
Mike
a wonderful
Michalowicz.
book. Yeah, I love that book.
Yeah. So I don't have a go-to productivity book. I've really created my own lane and methodology around productivity. Of course, I've read so many and I take influences from different places, but I don't have a go-to. But Profit First with Mike Michalowicz was literally personally game changer in my own business. And I've seen it change so many other business owners' mindset around money and businesses in general. So that's my go-to.
Yeah, I absolutely love that book, and I've used it in my own business as well. And it's a book that I recommend all the time. So definitely we have that in common.
Absolutely. I mean, I had recommended the book so much that somehow Mike Michalowicz heard, and they shipped me a case of books that I could share with my audience as a thank you, because they kept hearing my name on referring them. And I just thought that was such a kind gesture, and how connected he is with his audience that he knew who was referring the books to him. I thought was a great experience in general. And obviously I've had him on the show a couple of times now, but Yeah. That was one that I could like I definitely can say I can see a before and after in the business. And that's what we're going to talk about today is like how do you read, consume information, learn things, but really make an impact and change in our lives and our business.
Well, I am an open book, pun intended, and I'm a total nerd on this subject. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into it. But thank you for indulging my curiosity for a minute there and
Yeah.
answering what it's such a great book. And I read the physical copy of Profit First, but then there was a company called Lit Video Books, and Lit Video Books did a video version of Profit First. It was a 1 hour video version. It was all animated, and Mike was being interviewed in it, and I was training for a half marathon like maybe a year and a half ago, and I would run on the treadmill and I would watch a video book during my hour-long run, and that was one of the books that I read, and it got me invested in implementing a lot of what I had learned originally in the book but didn't implement. So yeah, just a fun little story for everybody. But what an excellent book. And as far as productivity is concerned too, just like leveraging Parkinson's law, but in your personal finances is such like a cool way to do it. To take your profit before you think about expenses. So pretty cool.
Yes. Okay, great. So I love that you shared different ways to consume information. So you're talking about a video. And as you said that, I was like, I want to watch that. Like I've listened to the book. So I usually go audio. And then when it's really good, then I'll buy the book and then take notes on the book. But as a refresher, because I mean, this book, it was many years ago that I implemented it, is a great 1 hour video. Like, how about a refresher? What's working? What's not working? And maybe I only implemented, 3/4 of it. Am I ready in my business to implement the other parts of it that maybe went over my head the first time I read the book? And that would be a great refresher.
Yeah, well, I love that. You'll have to let me know what you think.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So I want to ask, how did you become the book guy? So let me just set the stage for everyone listening, because I get video. We're on video here, but you guys are only hearing the audio. His entire background is color coordinated books. So for those of you that love the color coordination in the organization, I am just in awe of it. Obviously, books are your thing. How did you get there? Like, why do books matter so much to you?
Well, it will probably surprise the audience that when I was growing up, I was not much of a reader. In fact, I didn't think reading was cool, right? I was more of the athlete stereotype, not much of the academic. So I played football, I wrestled in high school. You couldn't pay me to do my homework. And that behavior sort of continued through most of my college experience as well. Now, I was always motivated and driven outside of the classroom, first through athletics, then through entrepreneurship, but I just wasn't an academic. Like I wasn't reading books. And so I took an internship going into my senior year of college. I was a business student and I had run my own house painting business for a few years, but I wanted to learn from somebody else. So I show up at this small business and I had about an hour commute each way. And my boss at the time, Kyle, he took me on a few local business trips and he would put on business podcasts. Now, this was brand new to me. I had never consumed a podcast before. We're talking back in about 2015. And since I had an hour commute each way, he said something to me like, hey, Nick, listening to the same song for the 1,000th time on your way to work is not going to get you closer to where you want to be in life, but the right podcast might. And so I started listening to podcasts. An hour there, an hour back every day, 10 hours of podcasts a week, excluding the weekends. And I fell in love with this format, just like your show. Like every once in a while, you're interviewing somebody, they're talking about what they did to become successful. And what I found was so many of those successful people were giving at least some credit for their success to the books that they were reading.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of had this moment where I realized, like, if I'm deliberately choosing not to read the books that the people that I want to be like are recommending, then I'm also deliberately choosing to live under my potential. And as a very competitive individual, I didn't let that sit for long. So I went to a local Barnes and Noble and I got a bunch of books and the rest is history.
All right. So do you prefer, what is your preference? Do you like to listen to audiobooks? Did you go from podcasts to audiobooks or straight? I mean, you said Barnes and Noble, so you went straight to reading paperback books, I guess, hardcover books.
I did. So I definitely consume a mixture of both. Let's say that I consume 100 books a year today. And remember, everybody in the audience, this is my full-time job now. So let's say I consume about 100 books a year. 2/3, maybe 3/4 of those books are physical paper books. And I'll talk about why I think they're the best for implementation in a minute. And the rest are audiobooks. I'm not much of an e-reader. So yeah, I love the physical paper books. Most people don't know this, but about 80% of the inputs to our brain are visual. And so by default, the other senses only make up about 20% of the inputs to our brain. Reading a physical paper book is therefore a little bit stronger as far as our ability to develop and consume information and retain it, because there's more of an input. But also, when you're reading a physical paper book, most of the time you are monotasking. You're focusing on one activity. So you can be fully into the book. Audiobooks are amazing. Again, I listen to a ton of audiobooks and podcasts, but we're multitasking most of the time when we're listening. So everybody today is probably like, yeah, I'm in the car, or I'm doing chores, or I'm at the gym, and that's okay. Maybe you're doing busy work. Again, it's better than listening to music. I think the right podcast or the right audiobook at the right time can change your life, just like the right physical book can. But odds are better if you're reading a physical book. So that's why I read most of them.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that's true too, because when I listen to a book and it's something that I want to implement, it's kind of like it goes through the first interview, right? You listen to I listen to the book and then I'm like, oh my gosh, this is good. I'm going to implement it. I have to go back and read and like consume it in a different way to implement. So you have a saying, I did a little research and you just said it, is consuming the right book at the right time. So what does that mean to you and what is the right time?
Well, I think these books, they can solve problems, right? They can remove pain, or they can help us develop skills, get it closer to where we want to be in life. And our needs, our pains, they're always changing. And so I try to read with intention. I try to read with precision. There's a couple different ways that I'll say this, but most of us think that our pain is unique to us. And we try to overcome it. We just can't fix it. That could be a relationship problem. It could be a physical pain. It could be something in our business. But the fact is, about 100 billion people have lived before us, all of humanity included. Millions of those people have written books documenting decades of their lived experience. You can read it in just days. Thousands of those books probably detail a solution to the same problem or pain that you're facing. And so I read to solve problems. I read to develop skills. I let somebody else go through all the trial and error and figuring it out. And then I just read about what they did to figure it out in a couple of hours and solve the problem for myself. The other way that I'll say this is that if you're dealing with something on a daily basis, over the next 30 years, so 365 times 30, you're going to deal with it 11,000 times. So why not, instead of just figuring it out yourself, why not read about how somebody else figured it out, spend the next 100 days implementing it, and not go through it 10,900 more times? That's just kind of how my brain works. So yeah, I think you should read with precision. Absolutely.
Yes. So I think that that's key, your intention. And I've shared this before, is like going on a content diet, right? We can get into this habit of where we're just feeling, and I have quotes, air quotes, but feeling productive, that we're just consuming. And as we know here at Productivity Straight Talk, like that's not it. It's about taking action. And that right there, where you said intention, is like at the right time is when you're ready to take action. There's some sort of pain point that you're willing to put in the work to solve, and you're missing some sort of knowledge. So knowledge with the opportunity to take action is a lot of intention there.
Yeah, and we can ramp this up, like inject it with some steroids. So here's how I think about intention. When I read a book, I like to set a SMART goal for each book. So that's what I call an intention, a SMART goal for the book. There's a business book that a lot of people are reading right now called $100 Million Leads by Alex Hormozi. I love Alex. I love the book. But a lot of people are just reading this book hoping that it's going to change their life. Instead, I say set a SMART goal, something that is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant to your life or business, and time-oriented. And so my SMART goal for $100 Million Leads, my intention for the book was to find and implement at least 2 lead generation strategies for my business by the end of October. Now I know whether or not the book has served its purpose, and I'll take it a step further. I'll write the intention on the inside cover of the book. and I'll review it each time I read a few more pages so that my brain can filter for those 2 actions that I can take. And so that's kind of how I think about intention. And it could be, find and implement 2 ways to improve your communication. It could be find a way to solve a very specific problem or develop a specific skill. Like there's all sorts of ways to kind of build a SMART goal around each book. But I think that's the way that you read and become more efficient with your intention.
Yeah, you're like putting a lens and a filter on through what the purpose is of investing your time into reading this book. I love that. I do something similar with conferences, right? Conferences cost a lot of money. You're there to get some sort of information. And if you're not intentional with a goal, you could leave and be like, whoa, why did I just cut out 4 days out of my life, my work, and fly and not have gotten anything that's actionable back into your life or business? And for me, it's about setting that clear goal, SMART goal, intentional about what it is you want to do. What that does is it just tweaks the conversations a little bit. It tweaks the experiences because that's the lens you're looking through. And I can imagine that extends to the book. It's the lens you're experiencing the book through, which is your goal, your SMART goal.
Yeah, I actually built this framework because of conferences. So same thing. I'd go to a conference, get all excited, take a bunch of notes related to miscellaneous subjects because every speaker has their own exciting thing to talk about. It's all life-changing. So you get excited and you take notes. And then because you don't have an intention, you don't prep yourself for action, the notebook just goes on the counter or on the shelf and it never gets opened again. So now, like the most recent conference that I went to, every time I met with somebody and they would ask, hey, what do you do? Why are you here? I would say, I'm looking to set up 5 virtual coffees with authors by the end of the weekend. Do you know any authors in the room? Right. And now I'm inviting that person to help me on my mission.
Yeah.
And maybe my goal is something different. Like I always ask people, what's your goal for this conference? What's your goal for the book? Like, let me help you with it. And most people don't have a goal, unfortunately.
Yeah. So the difference between just being a passenger or intentional, and you're being intentional. Yeah. Excellent. So how do you determine what a good book is and not a good book? I can't imagine every book I'm looking at on your bookshelf has been as life-changing as others.
Yeah, I would say 1% of the books behind me have probably created 99% of the change in my life, but that's okay. Every book serves its purpose, and not every book that you read is going to be a home run. There's a great rule that Ryan Holiday and Tim Ferriss were talking about one time, so I sort of stole it. It's called the rule of 100. And they say, take the number 100 and subtract your age. So I'm 29 years young, so I take 100, I subtract 29, the result is 71. That's how many pages I have to read before I can give up on a book. So the older you get, the wiser you become, the less you have to read.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a good rule. And so, no, I don't read every single book that I start to completion. Life is too short to read bad books. Sometimes I'll set an intention for a book and it's very clear to me after 71 pages that this book is not going to solve that problem for me, or even less pages than that, and I'll give up on it, and that's okay. But I'm also motivated by the idea that I'm always 3 feet from gold, the old Napoleon Hill kind of metaphor. And so the idea is that you never know, like that thing could be on the next page. And so I will jump around different chapters sometimes, skip ahead, browse, speed read, whatever. There's no one way to do it. Like I don't have a great rules system, but hopefully some of those things resonate.
Excellent. So as a small business owner yourself, what has been the most impactful books for your journey? Just growing your business, being more productive, anything that has been most impactful?
Yeah, the first book that comes to mind is The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
Mm-hmm.
I love that book. I used that book to create the business that I have today. So we're entirely remote. Although all 10 people on my team are in the US, so I'm not delegating to VAs and stuff like he teaches in that book. We built a remote company that's very efficient, and I automate, delegate, eliminate all the low impact activity or the stuff that drains my energy or that's neutral, and I replace it with high impact activity and stuff that's meaningful to me and that brings me energy. And I got all of those frameworks out of Tim's book. So that's one. Profit First, another book that has created a lot of impact in my business, but we already talked about that one a little bit. I loved The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. The idea that 95% of small businesses fail in the first 5 years, but that if you put the right systems in place, you can avoid that. I mean, that book has probably saved so many businesses. And then we just mentioned one of Alex Hormozy's books, $100 Million Leads, but the book that came before it, $100 Million Offers, was the best book that I read last year. And I read a lot of books. And it's a book for service-based businesses, helping you redefine your offer, adding more money. And it's such a wonderful book. In fact, it added an additional 6 figures of revenue to my small business, which is very meaningful in a small business, in just a couple of months after implementing it. And it was probably, you said you implemented 75% of profit first. Like, I probably only implemented 10% of $100 million offers. And it literally, that $20 investment and a few hours of my time generated over 6 figures in revenue in just a couple of months. Like, that's how much I believe in that book. So
well, thank you for that, because I think I'm going to have to bump it up on the list. My husband sent me that book and his links, and we were watching some of his videos together. And so I think you just bumped up his book on the reading list.
Yes, it's so good. And we recently had Alex on our podcast, and he's such a wealth of knowledge, a really valuable person.
Yeah, I've enjoyed some of his videos. All right. So what is your business model? So I know we're talking about taking action and implementing reading books, but that's not particularly your business model. So share with us a little bit about what your company does.
Well, as I started reading books and sharing the books I was reading on social media, just posting book reviews and stuff like that, the audience started to grow, which was amazing. I was connecting with people all over the world who loved personal development and business books. And something interesting happened. Authors started to reach out to me and they'd say, "Hey, Nick, I love what you're doing. I love your book reviews. Can I pay you to review my book?" And I thought, well, that's interesting. Of course you can. I'd love to get paid to read books, right? At the time, BookThinkers was an unsuccessful side hustle. And so I started to do paid book reviews. And I was taught by all of these business books to follow up with my clients and say, "Hey, is there anything else that I can help with? Can I try something else? I'd love to understand what your problems are, why you're paying me for a book review. Like, why is it so hard to sell books? What does the book do for you? Is it a lead mechanism for some type of higher ticket complementary product or service? How are they connected? Coaching, consulting, speaking." And so I really got to know authors, and I started to try all sorts of things. And kind of fast forward until today, I mentioned we have 10 people on our team. We serve a couple hundred authors a year in some type of paid capacity. And most of our services can be boiled down into 3 buckets. So we do short form content for social media, where we'll fly out and help an author turn their physical book into 50 to 100 pieces of short form video content for socials. That's platform building, brand building, positioning. Those calls to action can point towards some other things in the author's universe, and we kind of work on that branding together. Bucket number 2 is podcast booking. So we can place an author on up to 100 shows to talk about their book and their mission and some of their other products and services. And then we still do book reviews today. I mean, they're formatted a little bit differently, but we can still generate a ton of attention for authors. We do about 1 million impressions a month on our Instagram channel organically, and we have our podcast and all sorts of things. So although I originally set out to kind of influence readers, and that's what my upcoming book, Rise of the Reader, is all about, how to get more from the books you're reading, the authors pay the bills today.
Okay. Well, I love that, because there's so many knowledgeable people out there, and their skill set might not be marketing. They wrote an exceptional book and not enough people get to see it, hear it, learn from it. So that's what you're helping with.
Yeah. And I do believe the right book at the right time can change somebody's life. And that's my purpose. That's what I'm connected to. That's all of the work that I'm doing can boil back to that. And what I realized was I don't have to make that book recommendation. Like, I can support the author from behind the scenes and get their message out there more efficiently. And the end result is still the same. The right book ends up in the right hands. So yeah, absolutely. And it's not the best written books that succeed. It's the best selling books. And so you have to get out there, you have to market and sell your book.
Yeah. Talk to me about your upcoming book, The Rise of the Reader. What are we going to find in there? What are you sharing with us?
Yeah, so over the last couple of years, building my platform, sharing the books that I was reading, I've received hundreds of the same questions. How do I choose the right book? Or effective reading techniques, note-taking techniques. How do I take better action? How do I create accountability? And so I just wrote the book on it. I wish there was a resource I could have pointed to because I'm not a strong writer, but there really wasn't. So I decided to observe my own behavior at first and kind of almost from a third party perspective, like what does Nick Hutchison do when he reads and implements a book? And it took a while to sort of define and name all of the strategies that I use and sort of piece together where they came from and put them in a book. But this is the result. So that example that I gave before about setting a smart intention for each book that you read, that's something that I teach in the book, as well as a ton of other strategies. So yeah, I want people to get more from the books they're reading. I believe these books can solve literally every single problem that we're facing. As I mentioned, I don't think human pain and experience is really unique. I think there's been so many people that have figured it out. And if we choose not to read those books, we're underserving ourselves and our businesses and our families and stuff. And so, yeah, this book can help people get more from their other, the other books they're reading.
Okay, so as you're speaking, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so good, because how many people stop buying books, or they buy books and they just quit on themselves before because they say, oh, look at all the other books I read and didn't do anything with. And so then it becomes this self-fulfilling, I don't want to waste my time, so I'm not going to do it. And it's this feedback loop. And so if you want to get out of that negative feedback loop, learn the skill to take action. Oh my gosh, love this.
Yes, 1000%. Napoleon Hill said it best. Action is the real measure of intelligence. And I'll repeat that line until my face goes blue, because repetition also leads to retention, which is a strategy that we talk about in the book. But action is the real measure of intelligence. And so I'm 29, but if you include all of the books behind me, I'm thousands of years old. I've read thousands of years of other people's experiences in the last 10 years, and I've applied everything that they learned. It might have taken somebody 40 years to learn a lesson, and I can read it for $20 in a few hours of my time. Are you kidding me? There's no better exchange than that.
Right.
And so that's why I'm so obsessed with this space, because like life doesn't have to be so hard. You can just read and implement these books.
Okay. So how do you move into action? Do you read the book and take action while you're reading the book? So for example, the book you were reading to get to new lead generation in your business, did you wait till the end to start to, or were you like, oh my gosh, that's a good one, I'm going to start taking action as I'm reading the book? Like, what's your methodology?
Ideally, in my world, I wait until the end. And here's why. Let's say I'm reading $100 million leads, and again, I'm highlighting, my brain is filtering for actions to take as far as lead generation in my business. Well, maybe by the end of the book, I'll have highlighted 15 potential actions. Not every action is created equal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll rewrite those 15 and I'll kind of reflect on them a little bit. And I'll look at that list and I'll say, what 20% of these can create 80% of the change I'm looking for? Again, not everything's created equal, 80-20 principle. So I only want to take action on the highest leveraged, easiest to implement, most relatable actions in the book. And maybe that comes on the last page, maybe it's in the first page. Now, my process isn't always this perfect, but that's ideally what I do. Another thing that we're kind of talking about, so I'll just mention it, is I think that reading and note-taking / implementation are completely separate activities, and they should be treated as such. Like, in Productivity 101, not to multitask, but so many people are multitasking, task switching between reading, note-taking, reading, implementation, reading, note-taking. I'm like, separate them. So I just quickly highlight anything that I think is related to my intention as I'm reading. Once I'm done with the book, I'll go back through it a second time. I'll rewrite those 15 things, let's say, that I could take action on. I'll analyze that list and say, what is the highest leveraged activity that I can take action on? Then those get plugged into an activity tracker, which is a whole separate thing that we could talk about if you want. But what's not being measured can't be managed. Peter Drucker. So yeah, you've got to quantify your goal for the book. You've got to only take action on a reasonable amount of tasks. And I think you don't know what's reasonable and what's highest leveraged until you're done with the book.
Okay. What are some of your own reading habits? So one of the biggest reasons people aren't reading are, I don't have the time, right? And we're talking time management. I love that. Right? So that's one of the reasons they're going to give is I just don't have the time to sit and read. What are your habits around creating the time and being intentional about having reading as a priority in your life?
I think you'll love the first half of this answer. So when people tell me that they don't have time to read, I love to ask them the following question. If I paid you $10,000 to read a book by the end of the month, do you think you could do it? And that same person who just told me they couldn't read, they're like, well, I'll read 5, right? So it's not a question of whether or not you can read. It's a question of whether or not you do value reading enough to prioritize it over other things. So let's just say that you heard my example about $100 million offers and you're like, well, I want 6 figures of additional revenue in my business in the next couple of months. Like, I should read the book. Great. Here's how we get it done. We don't try to find time. We just replace a low impact activity with reading. So here's an example that I give in the book. If you can replace 15 minutes of your morning Instagram scrolling or TikTok scrolling with reading a great book, for a beginner, 15 minutes of reading is probably 10 pages. And if you can also replace 15 minutes of your evening Netflix or HBO or football or whatever with reading a great book, that's another 10 pages. Not the whole activity. I'm not saying be a robot. I'm not saying don't enjoy your time and watch TV. I'm just saying like replace a little bit of it with reading. So 10 pages in the morning, 10 pages in the evening, that's 20 pages a day, 5 days a week. Give yourself the weekends off. It's 100 pages a week. Most of these books are only 200 pages. So that's a book every 2 weeks. That's 26 books over the next 12 months, meaning, in my language, 26 different problems you can solve, skills that you can develop, or something in between, just by replacing a little bit of Instagram and a little bit of Netflix. Like mostly meaningless activities with something that does serve your future self. So I think that's how we get it done. We don't try to find the time. We just replace something low impact with something a little bit more meaningful.
Great. So you teased me with an activity tracker. You cannot tease someone like me with the activity tracker and not think I'm going to circle back. I want to hear all the things about it. What is it? Why'd you create it? Give us the insight.
Yeah, I will say my verbal description will not do it justice, but it is available in the book and I talk about every little area of it. So create a little curiosity for people if they find this interesting. So it all started when I read The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy a number of years ago, 5-6 years ago. And he talks a little bit about, it is such a good book.
Oh, it's so good. Like anybody pause right now, make sure you get that book. It was really good.
And it's so easy to read. Like if you read 20 pages a day, you'd be done in like a week and a half.
But even the strategy is so simple. And that's what's so powerful, right? Like, okay, never mind. We're sidetracking. Go ahead. Good book.
Yeah. So in that book, he talks a little bit about small steps in the right direction over a long period of time. And so I'll give you an example from the book, and then we'll go into my activity tracker. So a plane is taking off from LA and it's heading to New York City. But right before it takes off, the nose of the plane is just nudged 1%, let's just say to the south. As that 1% compounds, at first, it's almost imperceptible. But by the end of the trip, 3,000 miles later, it's in Delaware, like 150 miles south of New York City. So it missed its destination. Big difference at the end. Small 1% change. So Darren was talking about that, and then he recommended like tracking your activity. So what's a small change that you can make in your health or your fitness or in your business or in your relationship? And can you measure it? Can you set a goal for doing something like going to the gym 3 times this week? Yeah, I could do that. So my friend Joseph and I, we built out these matching activity trackers on Google Sheets. So each had our own tab, and it started very simple. You would have Monday through Sunday, then you would have a goal, and you would have the activity on the other side. So you'd say like, I want to go to the gym 3 times this week. You would set your goal for 3 times. And then as you're going throughout your week, you're just checking the box. Did you hit the gym today? Yes or no? And by the end of the week, did you hit your goal? And we started to add a ton of different activities to this. And then we started to add tons of different functions, like not every activity is weighted equally. You know, what's your like life number at the end of the week look like and compare it to your friends? Could you weight something to be way more valuable than everything else? What about goals that you don't want to repeat weekly and you only want them once? Could you measure your monthly, quarterly, and annual goals in this tracker as well. So we put everything in there. And let's say that I read $100 million leads and I found those two things that I wanted to implement. They get plugged right into my activity tracker. And my goal will be like, I have like a little test category. My goal will be try this out by the end of the week. Sitting on the side of this, I have accountability groups. I have two of them, and they both use the same tracking system. And so I might tell my accountability group on Friday morning, I might say, hey guys, I'm choosing to implement a couple of things from $100 million leads next week, and I can't wait to see what it's going to look like. They have visibility to my spreadsheet. So they click in, they see it, it's right there. Next week, I'd better take action, because if I don't, they're going to hold me accountable to it. They're going to say, Nick, you were so excited about this. You put it in your tracker and you didn't take any action. So the accountability piece is great too. You want people that are in your corner that are going to push you to execute on the tasks that you have in your tracker. So that's a little intro. I mean, it's quite a beast behind the scenes.
Okay. And did you create your own accountability group? Like these are your peers, or you run the accountability group?
Yes. So I created two different groups with my peers. Couple of words on that. So I do think we are the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. And so why not elevate your peer group as well? Like reading is not necessarily a solo sport, even if you're the only one in your friend group that's reading today. So what I did with a couple of my friends was I helped them quantify some goals outside of just personal development. Like, hey, remember that marathon you were going to run last year that you didn't do? Like maybe I could hold you accountable to it and we could meet on a weekly basis and just chat about it a little bit. And you could like throw your running goals into this cool thing that I made. So there's all sorts of conversations like that have happened over time to kind of get people in my world. Because again, sometimes it's okay to outgrow a friend group. Like anybody that's listening today might be the most motivated person in their circle, but that doesn't mean you have to leave everybody in the dust. Like help elevate your circle, and if you really don't have anybody around you that you could meet with, get in the comment section of your favorite influencer and look at how many motivated people are out there reading the same books you're reading and talking about the same things that you're doing, and shoot some people a DM, like get uncomfortable. Hey, I'd love to, I see you just started this book with, Rise of the Reader. I see you just started Rise of the Reader as well. Like you want to meet once a week and talk about a chapter or something like that. Like that's how it kind of starts.
Okay. And so you find having that external accountability really helps with consistently taking action, staying on target with your goals. And you knew that worked for you. So you created a space for your friends as well. And together, you guys are all improving in different areas of your life.
Exactly.
Okay. So this tracker, is it still in Google?
Yes.
Okay. And you said it's in your book. So I'm assuming that if someone buys your book, they can get access maybe, or?
Yeah, there's a template that can be down. Like you could just make a copy of the template and then it could be yours.
That's amazing. Okay. So what are any last tips that you have for someone that says, this every year is a goal to read more books and I fall short each year? What is the consistent tip or habit to stay consistent with reading and executing on the books they're reading?
Yeah, I really think it boils down optimizing for a certain number of books, I think, is the wrong goal. I think optimizing for a certain level of change is the right goal. And so if anybody in the audience needs help choosing the right book for them, shoot me a DM on Instagram. It's one of my favorite things to do to sort of play like book matchmaker. So tell me about a problem you have. Tell me about a skill you want to develop or something in between. And I'll respond with maybe some follow-up questions for clarification's sake. And then I'll provide a book recommendation and I will act as your accountability partner. So I have a little spreadsheet where I'll plug in, I recommended to Amber to read $100 million offers on October 11th. And I'll put a little thing in there 90 days later to reach out and see, hey, did you read the book? What did you think about it? So I'm happy to do that for people and implement the 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Even if you don't do it twice a day, remember that's still 13 books a year, 13 areas of your life that you can improve by just reading for 15 minutes once per day. And most people read faster than that once they kind of practice the skill a little bit. So you can read even more than 13 books in just 15 minutes a day. Schedule the time into your calendar. It could be during lunch, could be in the morning, whatever. I'll add another piece of context on this, which is I do advocate reading in the morning if you value your reading, because so many people, they'll tell me like, hey, Nick, I try reading, but I just fall asleep, And it's because you're reading at the end of the day, like you're all beat up, your willpower is depleted, you just put the kids to bed or whatever the case is. And like, now you're going to try to read when your energy is at its lowest. For me, I do my best reading after the gym in the morning when I have the exercise endorphins and right as the first caffeine is hitting my body. Like that's peak energy. And that's also when I want to read because it's impossible to fall asleep in that scenario. So 15 minutes a day at your highest energy, I think is how you get it done.
All right. Excellent. So how do our listeners find out more about you? What's your Instagram handle so they can DM you? And then also, where do they find your new book? That by the time this has gone out, it will have been released, correct?
Yes.
November 1st?
So
okay.
November 1st. Yeah. At BookThinkers on Instagram. That's our biggest community. It's spelled just like it sounds. Amber, maybe you can throw the link in the description below or something.
Absolutely. We'll have all that in the show notes.
Yeah. And then right from there are links in the Instagram for the book and for our website and everything else that we do. So yeah, just to make it simple, at BookThinkers on Instagram.
Great. Thank you so much for being here, Nick. Thank you for sharing some great strategies, experience, and tips. And I hope that those that have listened today feel like, all right, I'm recommitting. I've got an action plan. There's a purpose in reading to take action just based on our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to share. And I'll just say one last thing, which is that gratitude has been such an important piece of the puzzle for me over the last 10 years. So I'm grateful to you for having me on the show and for giving me a space to share what I'm so passionate about, because I do believe the right book at the right time can change somebody's life.
Thank you so much. Well, I hope you found the conversation with Nick to be incredibly valuable and insightful. I have loved having you listen to this episode of Small Business Straight Talk. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So based on this conversation about taking your newfound knowledge and applying it to supercharge your success, what is one habit or behavior change or action that you can take next time you find yourself a consumer of knowledge? Before closing out, I just wanted to let you know that I am taking on new clients. If you are looking for a coach to help you improve your time management, elevate your productivity, make strategic business decisions that will have a huge impact on increasing your profits and decreasing your stress, that is what I do every day for my clients. If you want to learn more, you can head on over to amberdelagarza.com to learn about how I work with my clients. And if you would like to schedule a discovery call, we can chat about what that would look like working together and determine if we're a great fit, and then identify how I can best help you achieve your goals. You can schedule that call by heading on over to amberdelagarza.com/call. Get that scheduled, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. So that's my straight talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.